City Commission work session. We are meeting today to discuss an item regarding the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project, but before we get to that, I'd like to ask for the roll call, and I would note for the record that Commissioner O'Donnell has been excused.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell.
Here.
And Mayor Denise McGriff.
Present. All right, so the item we have for discussion tonight is McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancements, and I would like to ask for our two staff people, Ms. Christina Robertson-Gardner and our city engineer, Dana Webb, to come up and help us out with this. How is the project doing?
Good evening. I'm Dana Webb, city engineer.
Get over on the mic.
And so tonight we are back. We were previously here in April and gave an overview of the most promising alternatives. And so you've had some time to kind of look over those and think through that. And we're back tonight to answer any questions and to confirm your preferred design alternative for the team to move forward. So again, we've got Nick Gross with Kittleson and our bridge engineer with HDR.
Great, thanks, David.
Hi.
And good evening. So, yes, I'll walk us through the presentation. We're happy to be back. This is our fourth work session with you all on the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project. Again, my name is Nick Gross. I'm a transportation planner with Kittleson and Associates, and Michael Roberts is here tonight with me from HDR. Michael is our bridge engineer. So, a pretty brief agenda. We will summarize the April work session briefly. We went into quite depth of the challenges and constraints that led us to the two most promising alternatives, so we'll very briefly recap those. Then we're gonna also recap some of the feedback that we received from you all during that session and the general support for advancing the long-spanned alternative from a concept level, and we just wanted to confirm that with you all tonight. We'll give a quick update on public involvement and then next steps. So, recapping the challenges and constraints of the technical work that's been performed to date, leading us to the two most promising alternatives. That was really rooted in the structural and constructability constraints, as well as the geotechnical and archaeological considerations, as well as the cultural and historic considerations. This has been the work that went on between December and led up to April. That led us to refining what was once a long list of about, I think, 9 or 10 alternatives down to 3, and ultimately our two most promising, which we presented to you at our last work session. That the two most promising were the conventional viaduct. We called that the signature or the two signature spans, as well as the long span. And then you may recall seeing these images from the last presentation as well. This first one here, the blue hue that you see at the bottom of the screen, that is our conventional viaduct or the two signature spans, as well as the long span alternative shown here. So as you may recall, we concluded the last work session with much more of a positive note towards the long span, primarily for the advantages it provides over the viaduct. There's a list here, the ones that primarily stand out for me. It's the mitigation and reduction of number of foundations and excavation requirements that it would require compared to the viaduct. So less holes in the ground, less risk. It's also a much lighter and shallow superstructure. The two foundations are much further away from the historic arch bridge. It minimizes those clearances below the deck and those utilities underneath. Less disruptions of traffic on McLaughlin Boulevard. It also allows us to work in the dry and high line access area. It's a contemporary solution, intentionally different from the existing historic arch bridge, which is something that we've heard through the environmental consultation, that not trying to mimic that structure in terms of looks or aesthetics would be favorable. So a long list of advantages. There are still some challenges, but it is a feasible and viable alternative that we believe is better suited compared to the viaduct option. We'll get to questions if there are any at the end of this quick presentation, and Michael can help answer any of the technical questions around the structure. So as I've mentioned at the end of our last work session, we heard general support for continuing to advance the long-spanned alternative. And we also have continued to hear support and a need for advancing not just this separated structure, but the streetscape improvements and traffic calming along McLaughlin Boulevard. So what does that look like? Whether, wider sidewalks, more landscaping, slowing traffic down along McLaughlin in the downtown area. We also have continued to work on riverfront activation opportunities, park opportunities, and the concept of the 8th Street dock and some kind of undercrossing of McLaughlin that would utilize the grade separated area of the viaduct today to get you from downtown closer to the river. Our main ask of commission tonight is just to confirm that staff should continue advancing this long-spanned alternative with the additional refinement and improvements that are noted above, primarily the McLaughlin Boulevard streetscape improvements. A quick update on public involvement. There's been several activities happening. There's been an ongoing community online engagement platform. There's a list of comments here, some of which we've also heard through our engagement with DOCA and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And then I believe Christina earlier this week presented at Planning Commission. Just some of the themes that we've heard. There's general support for advancing the long span. There's support and need and desire for better access to the river from downtown, supporting tourism and alternative options beyond just driving and parking, but access to the future Tumwater Village development and the attraction and bringing people through downtown and to downtown. Parking is and continues to be a very important feature. That's something we heard loud and clear at our engagement with DOCA last month. Safety of McLaughlin Boulevard is a top priority. Support for the project and its waterfront attractiveness, whether that's linear park opportunities and just overall visual improvements, are needed to McLaughlin Boulevard. And activate parking areas on each side of the arch bridge for more attractive uses, that back to the park piece, or spaces that could be better utilized for people. In terms of our next steps, we are currently working through an assessment of the long span and its potential adverse impact. As part of that effort, we are needing to compare the long span to the other alternatives that have been developed to date, primarily understanding what alternatives are feasible, but also meet the purpose and need of the project. We're advancing the streetscape design for McLaughlin Boulevard, and that'll be something that we bring back to you all in August to present the concept design for McLaughlin Boulevard in addition to the bridge structure or the shared use path that we've been focused on primarily with you all to date. The August commission work session will be our final session with you all, and then following that, Planning Commission will review and City Commission will together hopefully adopt a plan to bring this into the city's transportation system plan as an amendment to that document. And the last piece is a resolution for support for the next grant in the fall, and depending on timing, that may be ongoing before we actually wrap up this planning phase. That grant would seek design funding, which is the next step. We're still very much in the planning phase, the concept level. The city and staff are looking to advance and seek funding for that design phase, which would occur through a grant opportunity. Anything else to add?
Sure. I'm going to put the grant application staff hat on for a second. timing is never great. In a perfect world, we'd go through this process and adopt the plan to the TSP, and then we'd have the grant application open, but we're a little off center on that. So the grant application for the next 3-year grant cycle opens in September, and I believe we'll need a resolution of support for the concept, but we don't necessarily need it adopted into our transportation system plan, but we will at some point into the fall and winter in order to, advance the grant application forward. So both Dana and myself will keep looking at the grant deadlines and what exactly are needed from the city commission at any particular date. So I just wanted to kind of give a heads up that you may have a resolution that supports like the general concept of what's been done to date, but is not necessarily, adopting the document. Because if there's, final kind of tweaks needed to happen to streetscapes or further, things that need to be added to explain about what, items that are important to the city commission as we move into the next phase, as you get down to some of the fun details of streetscape design and art and all that kind of placemaking we won't have in the August design, but that's what we want to get into with the next design round. But we can integrate those comments from the city commission as we move through the formal adoption, but it might not be ready when we ask for the resolution. So that is just more of a timing comment.
So we're able to apply for the planning grant without it being adopted into the TSP yet.
But we can't move forward with the awarding of the grant until it's adopted. So we have a couple months spacing in between the initial submittal and then getting it granted.
Are there any questions?
Not questions, I got a couple of comments.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. Connections. So you already talked about the 8th Street dock and a connection to that. That's great. Obviously, we know about the connection to Tumwater Village. The other one that I'd like to bring up, and I know this is a concern or a desire from Commissioner O'Donnell as well, and that is a connection to the Arch Bridge on the water side of McLaughlin Boulevard. I know there's an elevation challenge and a ramp and all of that, and whether that could be a part of the initial project, I don't know, but certainly I would hope that we could come up with a design where we would be able to land a ramp from that sidewalk on the Arch Bridge down to this walkway. Because, there are so many things happening up between Tumwater Village and this project and what our friends in West Lynn are doing on their waterfront. Moving people, pedestrians, back and forth across that river is going to become really critical. It's going to take a long time, obviously, because there's lots of moving parts. But worst case, I just want to make sure we don't end up with a design and then think, boy, if we just could have had a way to connect this up there. So, and I know Commissioner O'Donnell would be in support of that also, a way to make sure that either if we can't do it right now, a way that we have a landing spot for that.
Thank you for the presentation. We've discussed this in passing before, and this is something that, as a concept, we haven't gotten into as much recently, but the potential of ODOT wanting to put in their bike ped between Oregon City and Westland, how does that factor into the design here? Again, recognizing that that's a conversation that we haven't had in a while and that we haven't even determined if we support, but if that were to happen, how do you see that fitting in with this infrastructure improvement?
Yeah, good question. And I was a part of that project as well several years ago. So I have a couple answers to that. One is, while we're not designing for that project, we're also not precluding any bridge head potential alignment. So I think that project ended with sort of 2 spheres of very vague alignments, one kind of near the 10th Street intersection and the other down towards the elbow we continue to refer to. as near the Tumwater Village site. So this bridge, our project here, would not preclude those connections from happening. We have been asked about kind of the bigger question of what is this project connecting to? Right now, it's providing a continuous connection to the Tumwater Village site and kind of finishing that last section of McLaughlin Boulevard. In terms of a larger regional connection, yes, you can work your way into downtown and cross over the Arch Bridge, but that potential ped bike bridge would create a more continuous loop that this project could tie into and then keep you moving across to West Lynn. So kind of a more convenient and efficient loop to continue on a future bridge there. So I think as I led with, the project team is actually quite similar that worked on that project and this project. So we have that sort of institutional knowledge of where that project ended and are making sure that nothing we're doing here is precluding that long-term vision of a future connection.
Thank you.
Good comment. So one of my concerns about that whole issue with this project and that project, which I hope, well, as you probably were aware, I was not supportive of some of the parts of that project. And when I thought about this the other day, to me, it starts making that area cluttered. I mean, one of the signature views that we have along the McLaughlin Boulevard corridor is that you can look out there and you can see the falls, and then when you look the other way, you see our beautiful bridge, which we just, had our celebration two years ago. And I worry about too many things, trying to take a 10-pound weight and put it in a 5-pound bag. And that's probably my biggest concern about it. I supported the proposal to bring it closer to 10th Street because I felt that was going to push it away from the Arch Bridge, also allow for the new corridors, and provide some economic development stimulus for downtown. So people can come across the bridge, ride their bikes or whatever they're doing, walking, strolling, riding, rolling, whatever, and come into downtown. And hopefully we have a Liberty Plaza Park that belongs to us that we can further activate places for people to, hang out, visit, not sleep, unless they are really tired. And so it just, again, that end there with what the tribe wants to do, you have this project, what else is good, there's concern. Go ahead, just jump in. We're all jumping in.
So, I'm struggling with this a little bit, and I'm glad, Commissioner,
What's his face?
Commissioner Adams.
This guy over here.
So we were not big fans of the plan to put a bridge across, bike and ped bridge across the Willamette for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm very supportive of a connection along the riverfront, to expand that pathway. But the instant that I started seeing visuals of bridges, I thought, okay, how are we gonna respond? How are we going to keep a straight face by saying we don't support a bridge that goes across the river, but we support a huge bridge that stays on the same side of the river? And because when you see the pilings for this walkway, it's a giant bridge. And I understand that that's, the ability on how to build it, but then it's like, okay, we're okay coming up, supporting a plan that creates a giant bike ped bridge that just stays on our side of the river, but not one that goes across. I think that's something we have to struggle with. I have sat and looked at these images, and at first I thought, oh, there's no way, because it's so, And we do want something iconic, I think, but at the same time, the conventional viaduct was a big no to me, because there is very much just a bridge that's stuck to the side of the road that blocks our view, and is a big eyesore. I don't know, it's hard for me to tell how big of an eyesore the supports would be for the suspension things. I mean, with the cables, I'm sure you get a lot of visibility, and I don't necessarily think that maybe the drawings that we're seeing would be the exact placement or the exact way it would look, because that's drastic. I mean, it's a city skyline change on a massive level that I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I think we have to balance that with, what does that do to the other iconic focal points of our town? It completely obliterates them or completely distracts from them, and it may not. There may be a way that it could be done, but I mean, it would replace, well, I shouldn't say replace. I worry about the competition of this new iconic structure, if it is that iconic, in comparison or distraction of the elevator or the bridge. And, you know, the more I got to looking at that image, I thought, okay, well, it does, you know, really, you know, is it a symmetrical, you know, if we see it as the design it is on paper, which I know is not a final concept and could be changed in various ways, it might not be symmetrical, but, you know, does that enhance and create a focal point for the iconic historic structures that kind of change the riverfront, or is it a distraction from that? I think that could go either way very easily, and I think that's one of my biggest worries of it. We definitely want to have some cool place that people can feel comfortable getting to and walking along the riverfront, and so I'm excited about that. And I clearly know that there's not a lot of easy ways of doing that without making it completely bulky. And in fact, this is probably the best scenario. I just would like to see some variations of how that structure works, or how those two components work.
Can you bring
I'm sure there's ways of doing it that are, you know, different, like the Vancouver, where it's maybe not symmetrical, or it is, and I don't know. It's hard to know without seeing it, but yeah, if you could pull it up, because I like looking at that visual. From the start of the meeting to the end of the meeting last time, I actually started thinking, that's not actually that bad. Like, but it's so, when you see something that massive of a change in your town, and you're like, whoa, are we dreaming? Is this even something possible? And then towards the end of the meeting, I thought, okay, well, I actually could see this. But that first plan there, the arch over the 8th Street dock, I mean, great, that'd be perfect, and it's subtle. But that, I can't live with that other piece, right? I mean, that other piece on the viaduct is completely a competition with the arch bridge, completely closes off the city from, you know, the view from Westland into Oregon City, or this, you know, what do we have? Why do we have this giant bridge that stays on the same side of the river kind of thing? So, click to the other one again. And, you know, the more I look at it, I can argue it. I mean, is it a centerpiece that puts a focal point on the bridge and the elevator? It certainly does. It frames it.
Yeah, it frames the elevator.
You know, it's just such a massive structure to get used to of it changing the whole city. So I think there's ways of doing it, and be curious to see what other configurations you can accomplish the same thing. But, you know, so I'm in favor of a massive bike pedestrian bridge that stays on the... Kidding. There you go. We're just going to take that bridge that the ODOT dreamed of, and we're just going to smack it right along the front of our side of the river.
Yeah, works for me. Yep, I think we can make that happen.
And I know in the draw, obviously in the photo, the length is to scale. Do we think engineering-wise, the height of things are to scale, or the... Like the mass of the columns, the angled columns and such?
Well, and we have a height restriction in downtown. So those spot hirelings, I can't think can go beyond the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah, good evening, Honorable Mayor and
Not to throw
Commissioners.
too
Those
much
are,
at
those are
you.
some pretty good points and a lot to digest there. I think, yeah, scale-wise, it is to scale, mainly because of the catenary to get that sag properly under the bridge. There's a key aspect of threading the needle there. So the geometry is such that it's feasible from a design point of view, from a conceptual level, the forces make sense and they're reasonable for the tower alignments, things like that. You can see that we leaned both of the towers out asymmetrically to make that kind of be symmetrical because...
Flip that mic around so that you're talking directly to it.
Sorry, yeah, okay.
It's okay.
So, yeah, so the challenge was the south pier has to lean out to pick up the bridge because of the alignment. So as a result of responding to that alignment, we kind of tilted it back at the other end, so to get some symmetry. So on the two towers, looking at an elevation. But there's a lot of ways to deal with the towers themselves. You can split them. There's a lot of geometric formations. You can clad them in materials that are stainless and absorb the light more effectively, or you can change the colors and do different things, right? We kind of like this image because it does sort of frame the arch bridge very well. It also kind of signifies and kind of talks to the geometry of the elevator. I think it's about very similar in height. From what we looked at, it's about 110 feet at that location. And also we're trying to frame, as you see the tower on the north end is sort of framing Mount Hood as well. So there's an angle and geometry that kind of speaks to that. As a whole, the idea is to make sure that the arch is the focal point of the entire waterfront. And the intent of the experience of this structure is that bike and peds will have the opportunity to embark upon it, be attracted to the structure as a contemporary icon, but also experience it going through the arch. So the cables kind of reduce in height, and the experience is kind of going through that portal in sort of a time traveling sort of aspect, but also in a contemporary way to do that. So that's kind of the game plan. Unfortunately, the blue Smurfy kind of look makes it kind of pop out a lot more than it would actually look in this condition. The frames of the mainline cables, I mean, you could scale them up by 2 or 3 times and you still wouldn't see them in real life. They're basically 8-inch diameter. They're very small. And then the hangers are 1 inch in diameter. You probably wouldn't even see them either. So unfortunately, the blue is there to kind of make sure that everyone's very aware that this is a conceptual image and it's not really there, as some people believe. But that's the intent. So really, there are aspects of the conceptual view that you would see that kind of diminish with different materials and more kind of appropriate visualizations that kind of work with the lighting and things like that. Did I address some of the concerns about the visuals and maybe, but you're right.
I think I assume the height limit for downtown would restrict that unless we change that, right? I mean, or is that just refer to storefronts and buildings?
We'd have to look into it. At some point, it's really at the time of construction of the bridge, so we've received multiple grants and done construction. So if we as a community need to allow a larger height for infrastructure projects, we can go through a legislative process to do that.
I think it's in place right now.
We just make
the height limit.
Yeah, I think it's, my thought is it applies to buildings. This is a transportation conveyance.
Well, it's probably splitting hairs, but might it be outside the district since it's on the other side of No, seriously, I think McLaughlin Boulevard is probably...
I don't know, that's
Well, I
it's
believe
probably the edge of the
that our
district.
city limits goes to the center line of the river.
Yeah, but the design district doesn't.
We don't have,
I don't know.
we don't have an official design district.
Well-
It just applies to design review,
Downtown,
applies
period.
downtown.
Yeah, but that's the zone where the height restriction not taller than the
Then the
Masonic
Masonic
building.
temple, yes.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
yeah, it's something it is something we'd have to deal with one
Yeah.
way or the other.
Okay, anything else?
Actually, I have a question. As we move forward on the streetscape design this kind of summer, and we were working with DOCA and other property owners and things you've heard from our design team, is there any other direction you want to give staff and the design team about things you want to make sure we look at as we do our kind of streetscape analysis of what we can do to add more greenery and slow cars down?
Anything else that we didn't already bring up? Good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we don't have anybody here to talk to us about this. We have the comments that were submitted as part of the staff report, and got some comments from Commissioner O'Donnell. So I think all in all that we are good. And do we have anything else?
That's all for tonight.
All right. So we're adjourned until 7 o'clock.